Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us again for another version of our Tech 90. I have Jesus Fraga, I
How's it
have
going,
James
everybody?
McIntyre, and Daniel Hamrick,
Good
and
morning.
myself, Greg Bruntz. So let me take a quick second, let them guys tell you what they do for us here. Start with you, Jesus.
So, my name is Jesus Fraga. I help out on the commercial team. Anything that has to do with multi-pro, pretty much answer questions, even a little bit of troubleshooting on the tech team. Just kind of help out as far as the multi-pro line goes.
All right, James.
I'm the commercial sales manager, but I've long been a technical person, and so I cover the VRF and multi-pro, and also assist with mini splits and flex from time to time.
I think most everybody on this podcast probably seen your nerdy videos again before, so we know you're technically savvy.
I'm just a salesman. That's all I do.
Daniel, you're up.
Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm Daniel Hamrick with Tech Support. I'm the Director of Technical and Training. And what do I do, Greg? I'm sure you've seen me on videos, so that's a lot of what I do. And escalations and help make sure everybody's system's working like it should, and do what I can to help if it's not. So looking forward to learning about the multi-pro today, and turn it back over to Greg.
And then myself, I'm the National Tech Support Specialist for commercial team, meaning BRF and multi-pro equipment. So, yeah, it's a fancy title for, when you guys call in and I hurry up and try to figure out what to tell you. So, but, one thing I do want to say about multi-pro real quick is we just had our TSA conference where we had a bunch of TSAs from all distribution all over the country. We all got together down in Florida last week. And one of the comments that came out in that was about some people view the multi-pro equipment as more complicated. And I wanted to give a shout out real quick and just say, look, I've got one of these systems in my own home. Once a qualified contractor installs one, they're going to realize that they're not as complicated as they look. So keep that in mind as you are paying attention to what we're doing today in this broadcast. So today we're going to be covering the design and installation of multi-pro systems. Our schedule today, first as always, we're going to go over why we chose the topic. Then we'll run a clip from a recent training that introduces some installation best practices. After that, we'll come back and chat with you and answer questions that you may have. And then next, we'll continue and dig a little deeper into the startup. And we'll then finish up with another live Q&A session. We encourage you to get into the conversation. You should be pros at this by now. As a reminder, if you have questions or comments at any time during this broadcast, use the question mark icon on the right of the screen and send them our way. We'll answer any relevant questions until we run out of time. Again, this opportunity is to connect with us and become more comfortable with the latest in GREE comfort. So I stress this on every broadcast we do. We do this for you guys to help you guys with your questions and stuff and get you engaged. So if you're not asking questions, it's pretty hard for us to answer questions that are not asked. And there is no stupid question. The only stupid question is the question that is not asked. So no matter what you think, whether you think it's a dumb question or not, please ask us the questions. We're happy to try to answer them as best we possibly can. But the other thing I will say to that is try to keep it on topic. So we're talking about multi-pro today. So I really don't want to see mini split questions. I want to hear questions about multi-pro itself. So let's get started. Why do we choose this topic to highlight? My thought process behind this is, we've done the design and installation of multi-pro multiple different times. Not everybody gets to see it. And I think the more you see it, the easier you start comprehending that the system's not as difficult as people wanted to believe it is. And one thing I got to make sure I point out to everybody is MultiPRO doesn't have to be multiple indoor units. It can be a one-to-one system with an air handler, whether ducted unit, with a smaller system with a wall mount, like a 2-ton with a 2-ton wall mount. But you gain a lot of efficiency and with the system. So keep that in mind. It does not have to be a multi-zone system. So, James, you want to add anything to that? I see you smiling there. I think you got some good thoughts on this.
Yeah, well, with multi-zone equipment, a lot of manufacturers will list, how many combinations there are. I can tell you that I, and among many others, tried to come up with a chart that would show all the combinations that were available for a multi-pro system. And actually, our web developer came up with a tool to be able to give us all the possible combinations, and it was a few thousand combinations. So any kind of application that you've got, you can do it. I mean, the most common would be as a one-to-one system or a two-zone system, like an upstairs, downstairs type split. Something like that. Those are the common ways. I mean, not many people are going to be doing, 10, 7,000 BTU cassettes or, something like that. So, I mean, I know that's what people want to focus on as far as, the multi-zone capability, but I mean, it's a top tier, high efficiency system right out of the gate, and it is capable of doing those things. So instead of messing around with zone damper systems and trying to balance things and, or not balancing the air, because a lot of your competitors do that pretty well constantly, just consistently. That's the one thing that's consistent is that they mess it up. Their airflow certainly isn't. You know what I mean?
But, it's interesting you bring that up because when I was going through the build of my home down here in Tennessee, I was meeting with the HVAC contractor in my framed up house. It wasn't even close to completion yet. And there was a discussion between my builder and the HVAC guy on the same exact floor plan at another house. And the complaint was the back bedrooms would not heat and cool properly. And the contractor told my builder, he said, look, he says, I don't know what else to tell you other than we're going to have to add a separate system and be able to heat and cool those rooms, because he goes, I can't get adequate ductwork over there because of the vault in the living room. And I'm like, I'm standing and I'm holding the plans for my house. I'm holding the HVAC layout for my house. And I'm like, oh, so you're talking like zoning by refrigerant. Oh, wow. We could do that right here with one outdoor unit. Oh, we are doing that. And I'll never forget where the HVAC contractor turned and looked at my builder and he goes, he isn't wrong, right? It was priceless because, I mean, the layout with this house, and he's absolutely right. The vault on my house, mine's only 15 feet, but the original plan was an 18-foot vault at that living room. You're not getting ductwork over an 18-foot vault to those back two bedrooms without having a separate system. Now, it's really easy to do with the MultiPRO system because now all you're doing is getting refrigerant piping over that vault or under that vault, like underneath in the crawl space over to the other side or basement or whatever. But, it depends on the crawl space too. So mine's actually a pretty decent crawl space, but if I had a really tight crawl space, that would be difficult to get ductwork there as well. So, but this particular home that they were talking about, the only solution to that problem, again, is my same floor plan, was to add another system for the bathroom and 2 bedrooms on the other side of that vault on that house. So just kind of a, a thought to think about, if zoning by ductwork, I'm not going to say it's a bad thing, but you still have to move the quantity of air that system requires for it to function properly. With a MultiPRO system, we got a fully variable system, and we're only sending refrigerant through the circuits that they're actually calling for it to operate. The compressor can modulate down. If we've only got 2 ton worth of load, we've got a 4-ton unit. We're not running the compressor at full speed. There's no reason it needs to run at full speed, and we're keeping up with the demand of those units. So very versatile, very efficient systems with the MultiPRO.
Yeah,
I love
Greg,
the. Go ahead, Jesus.
I was just going to add to that. The trainings that we hold, like trainings like this, are really beneficial for the audience. That way, they're able to see exactly what the system can do and what system can pair up, with the one outdoor condenser that you're speaking of. All the indoor heads, the variability. It's just there's a lot of flexibility there. Whether you want an air handler, just like a regular air handler, whether you want a wall mount, whether you want a ceiling cassette. I think that's where these trainings really are beneficial for the audience. That way they can see exactly what they can do.
And I love the conversation about zoning with refrigerant. We talk about that a lot. We've done it on the Talking Copper Live show, and it's staying stuck in the back of my mind. When conversations about, hey, can I zone this thing, and having that conversation about zoning with refrigerant and the possibilities there is incredible. We had a couple of questions come through that I just wanted to hit real quick before we jump into the training. Keith is asking, is the webinar being recorded so they can share it with the branch staff? Most certainly. We'll have it recorded and posted, and so you'll be able to share it with everyone. And then a question from Michael. He said he hasn't seen a 7K BTU option. They're available now. I don't know for sure. I know there's a 9K air handler. Is there a 7K one too, James?
Well, as far as availability, I mean, we've got as low as a 5,000 BTU unit, but we've got a 5,000 BTU unit ceiling cassette. We've got a 6,000 BTU wall mount, 7,000 BTUs inducted, wall mount, cassette, you name it. Sorry, there is a 9,000 BTU isn't available to order as far as air handler goes. But we do have like 1-ton air handlers in stock, so you don't have to use a 1.5 tons every time.
Yeah.
So if you do a load calculation and you're like, oh, all I got to have is 14,000 BTUs, you don't have to put a 1.5 tons on it. You might be able to get closer to it, or excuse me, I should have chose a different number. But but if you did a calculation, you had 10,000 BTUs. You don't have that high humidity. Constant cycling. Yeah, there's a bunch of different options. All of those options are available on our GREEcomfort.com website. So if you wanted to take a look at MultiPRO and just scroll through or move, you can use your finger to move through the different indoor units and click each one. Each one's got manuals and submittals and all of that kind of information. But also there is a system builder tool for the MultiPRO. So if you, it's an easy to use tool where you can select how many ever indoor units or how many ever zones that you need. And then each one of those indoor unit options are there, and each size is in there as well. So there's just a bunch of different ways to lay this out, or simply giving us a call or giving your rep or a salesperson a call. You might be able to get some information out of them as well.
Yeah, because we don't like talking about MultiPRO, do we? So with that, well, let's jump into it. Let's run the video so that these guys get a chance to see what we're talking about. And then, like I said before, we will come back after we play some video, and we will come back and answer questions live. And then just a reminder too, and then after that, we'll have some more video for you, and we'll come back and close it out with more answering questions. So let's go ahead and run that video, and we'll go from there.
Welcome to another technical training down here in Atlanta. Once you get on our website at GREEcomfort.com, if you see the / in here, it's system documentation. That's because we're on the system documentation page where you get all of our installation manuals, service manuals, all that kind of stuff. You can just put in GREEcomfort.com. It's going to bring up this page. You can go to products up here. You go down here to MultiPRO. It tells you all about MultiPRO. It tells you all the indoor units. You can go GREE difference. You can go to homeowners, contractors, distributors tabs, resource tabs. So we got a whole bunch of different tabs up here. System documentation. You can go over here to MultiPRO. It's kind of a short. And then just MultiPRO complete. So I just want to explain this web page real quick. So You've got MultiPRO, which is basically a combination of information between ultra heat and standard heat pump. And then you have the controllers. This is all about your Y branches. And then, so you have your heat pump, your ultra heat, and then you have your ceiling cassette, your two ways, and all of the indoor unit options. But what I wanted to show you here was if you go to MultiPRO, come down, and there's a sales brochure too, but this is what I wanted to show you was the quick reference guide. I like sharing this because it's kind of a one-stop shop. So with this, it's going to give you all of your standard units, the 2-ton, the 28, the 36, the 40, and the 60 indoor or outdoor units. And then it's also got our Ultras here, which are the newer Ultras, the GMVVs. And you now have a 3-ton, a 4-ton, and a 5-ton Ultra Heating MultiPRO machine, okay? The Super Multis and MultiPRO both used Y branches. So the thing with that is, and we ran into it quite often, where these were installed wrong. They have to be installed, if they're installed horizontally, they have to be 100% level. They cannot be like this. The problem is all your refrigerant is going to go through that lower pipe and you're going to get very poor refrigerant flow in the upper pipe. So these Y branches can be installed horizontally. They have to be within 15 degrees, and that's what the quick reference guide shows you, but preferably level, okay? And they should be strapped so that they can't come unlevel. And I took those calls myself with Super Multis where they weren't working properly, and it's because, and then when I got pictures sent in to us,
because of the Ys.
it was because the Y branches were turned like this or like this. You can't do that. They have to be perfectly level. Now they can be installed vertically, either way, okay? That's fine. You can do that. You just can't turn them up on end. I can't stress that enough. So since I had examples here, I wanted to make sure you guys seen that. Now each one of the Y branches you order, when you order it, you will get the liquid one and you will get the suction. And if I would grab the right insulation jacket or flip it around there. And it also comes with the insulation jacket that goes around it. But each header assembly you order gives you one for liquid, one for gas. You don't have to order them separate.
You don't have to order two of the part number.
Correct.
It comes with both.
It comes with both. It comes with, each box will have one liquid, one gas. All right. But your layout and the piping and everything is only going to show the liquid, but you will get the gas. And then these headers, same thing here. These can only be installed horizontally, and it's hard for us to show it in a picture in a horizontal configuration. They have to be 100% horizontal. They cannot be installed vertically. And then down here to these basic piping rules defined and stuff. This is kind of just quick notes to everything I'm going to cover in the PowerPoint. All right, so we get out of that. And let me go up here to the Contractor tab. We're going to go to the System Builder app. So I'm going to show you guys, this is all web-based. It's pretty easy to use. And I've done all kinds of crazy ones. Most of these I'm just playing. So we'll create a new one. Maybe. Okay. We'll call this 11/14/2024. How about that? Because that's today. Hit save. Close. All right, so now we go down here, build a new system. So when you build a new system, you can do a single zone mini split, you can do a multi-zone mini split, you can do a MultiPRO standard, you can do a MultiPRO Ultra, and you can do central air. So we'll do an Ultra, just for an example. We're going to do 3 indoor units. Remember, your outdoor to your header or to a Y branch is required 10-foot minimum, okay? That's why it automatically populated 10 feet. Now, we still got to work on some updates to the standard heat pump one. That's why I'm using the alter. This is the most recently updated one. We're in the midst of getting the standard updated a little bit better for you guys, which will make it more user-friendly. All right. So the way the MultiPRO system builder works is this automatically defaults to using a header. If I do 2 indoor units, it's defaulting to a Y branch, okay? So if I only got 2 indoor units, it's going to default to a Y branch. If I'm doing more than 2, it's going to default to a header. If I was doing like 5 or more, it's going to default to the 8-port header. If I'm doing 4 or less, or well, 3 or 4, I should say, then it's going to default to the 4-port header. All right, moving on. So we have some drop downs that you can use here, or you can just type in whatever you want. So we'll just call this showroom 1. Unit type, let's do a air handler. And you know what? I'm going to change this. We're going to, because I like to do this. Let's call this the living room. How about that? And let's make this a 30,000 BTUs. And then from the header to the air handler, we're going to go, you either use the up and down arrow keys, or I can just type it in. So I'm going to go 55 feet. Okay. Then we're going to call this a bedroom. And we're going to go with a wall mount. And we're going to do a 9K. And we're going to put this at 49 feet. Then we're going to go to another, let's call this the game room. And it's a big game room. So we're going to go with an air handler, and we're going to make this like 24K. And we're going to add, let's make this like 30 feet. And it gives these warnings. Max height difference between indoor and outdoor units is 49 feet. Max height difference between the outdoor unit is 131 feet. It's just kind of some warnings there. All right. So we've got the 2.5-ton air handler. Its line set size is 3/8, 5/8. The charge value per foot for the 3/8 pipe is 0.58 inches. You can actually click right here and it takes you right to the submittal for that unit. Then we have the 2-ton air handler. That's 3/8, 5/8. And the charge amount for that unit is 0.58. Then we have the 9K wall mount, and pipe sizes are 1/4, 3/8, and our multiplier for that is 0.24 for a refrigerant. Okay. Now, what I want to show you is, all right, so we can do, it's given me the ability to do the 5-ton air handler, or 5-ton condenser, but I can also do it with a 4-ton condenser because my connection capacity is still within allowable, okay? So total refrigerant charge there is 39 ounces, and this one's 39 ounces. So what I want to do, I want to show you something here. I'm trying to remember how I go back. Let's go to, give me just 1 second here. Let me choose select. There we go there. All right. I selected that. Now I can go back here and edit it. This is what I want to show you. This wall mount, I got it at 49 feet. I'm going to change this to 55 feet. Continue. Now, look what it did. Now, my line set is 3/8 half inch. It upsized the liquid line from 1/4 to 3/8, and it upsized the suction line, or the gas line, from 3/8 to half. And our multiplier for refrigerant changed to 0.58 because now we got a 3/8 pipe. The point I'm getting at, and you're going to learn as I go through the PowerPoint, the basic layout rules that we have restricts you to 49 feet or less, or even just call it 50 feet. A foot's not going to make you or break you. When you breach that 50 foot, it's going to increase the pipe size, which is not a problem. You can do that, and as long as we increase the pipe size, that's not an issue. What becomes an issue is if you do that from that header to that indoor unit, you're going to have 3/8 half inch pipe. Once you get to the indoor unit, you got to reduce back down from 3/8 to 1/4 and from half inch to 3/8 to be able to connect it to the flare on the indoor unit. This is one of those examples where I would tell you using multiple Ys or relocating the header to keep it under 49 feet on these smaller BTU units like this 9K wall mount, so that you keep your line set sizes the same as the indoor unit, so that you don't have to reduce back down at the indoor unit. It just adds to the ease of the installation is what I'm getting at. You can do it, there's nothing wrong with it. I'm just telling you, you're going to save yourself a lot of headache if you go to multiple Ys, or if you go to moving that header so that you stay under the 49 feet or under 50 feet. If you're going to use a multiple Y system, more than one Y, we do require you go to selection software for that. Selection software is going to be able to show you properly how all those Y branches work out and get all the pipe sizes correct. And it'll also calculate your charge. So, moving on, again, you know, make sure your refrigerant lines are going to be neat and proper and not looking like that, put it that way. So the indoor units. All of the indoor units with MultiPRO are 230 volt power supplied. There is no 120 volt options for indoor units. So we do recommend that you have a means of disconnect, because the last thing you want to do, I mean, because you can have like 4 wall mounts or 4 cassettes, even possibly 4 ducted units, all on one 15 amp 230 volt circuit. But when you're there to service the system, you don't want to have to turn off power to all of them at once. So if you just have a means of disconnect at those indoor units, that's highly recommended. It does not have to be an AC disconnect like you see here. It can simply just be a 15 amp 2-pole switch, as long as we're killing power to both L1 and L2, so it's safe to get our hands in there and work on the machine. Part of the reason why I decided that we're going to cover this again, going over installation and stuff, because I don't think the message has gotten out there to everybody that is now being introduced to and installing MultiPRO. But this is a good example of showing you how MultiPRO is versus mini-split multi-zone in the wiring. So on a mini-split multi-zone unit such as you see here, you have individual line sets for each indoor unit and the 14-4 wire that will power the indoor units. So your 14-4 wire is also your communication and power supply to your indoor units. MultiPRO is done differently. You will have a power source, and it could be individual power source or sharing power source to each one of the indoor units, but that has nothing to do with your communication. That is going to be your 18-2 stranded comm wire that is going to run a daisy chain from the outdoor unit to your indoor units, and then daisy chain from there to the next one, from there to the next one. Your power supply for outdoor and your power supply for indoors are completely separate, unless you would use that adapter that we showed you in the quick reference guide, where you could actually power the indoors from the outdoor unit. Again, if it's a new installation, I would highly recommend that you come out of the breaker panel and have a separate circuit, not power it off the outdoor unit. That, like I said, that is really more geared to, you've got an existing multi-zone system that you're going to be replacing with a MultiPRO system, and trying to get power to them individual indoor units is going to be a little trickier than if you just use that power adapter for the outdoor unit. All it is, if you look at that power adapter, all it is inline 15 amp fuses in that wiring harness, so it fuses the indoor units. All right, moving on. So I want to talk about the wiring a little bit. So it is not required that you use grounded shielded wire with MultiPRO, but it is highly recommended just to shield out any interference. But if you're going to do grounded shielded, it's very important that you do it properly. Our recommendation is that you would hook that grounded shield wire, this bare wire right here, to the outdoor unit. And then as you have your cables, such as this right here, going in the indoor unit, so like this air handler, for example, would have two of these cables, one coming from the outdoor unit, one going to your next indoor unit. What you want to do is just hook up your D1 and D2s, and then take your grounds and splice them together. Realistically, you don't even really got to use a wire nut. That ground wire is so fine. All you got to do is twist it together, and then what I'll tell guys to do is lay that back on that casing, and then just wrap it with electrical tape. That way, this ground and then this aluminum shield, just tear it off of there. What we don't want is that ground to be able to touch anything in here. Ground, we don't want to touch in H1, H2, we don't want to touch in anything. And then you're going to carry that same pattern all the way through till you get to the last indoor unit. You do have to install this resistor that comes shipped with the outdoor unit. That is a 1/4 watt, 120 ohm resistor. And it's already got the little U channels on it for you to be able to hook it up to D1 and D2, and it just goes parallels D1 and D2. If for some reason you lose this resistor, if you go on Amazon, you can buy, I bought a pack of 100 of them, 1/4 watt, 120 ohm resistors for $5. So they're not hard. We don't stock those because they're so easily bought on Amazon. It's just not worth our trouble to try and stock them. So, but again, they do come shipped in the bag in the outdoor unit. So, the grounded shield. The reason why you don't put grounds on both ends is because now it becomes a ground conductor, and it'll actually conduct, you know, like if you get electrical interference, like say in here, it don't have one direct path. The whole idea with grounded shielded is any interference, whether it be from a fluorescent light, it be from another inductive load, whatever it is, any of that trying to interfere into that comm line hits that ground wire, has one path to ground and gets rid of it. When you have more than one path to ground, it just stays on the wire, kind of bouncing back and forth. And it doesn't really get rid of your interference. With MultiPRO, they are self-addressing, so you don't have to set dip switches or anything like that. It will automatically adjust. You have to maintain a 50% connection capacity ratio. So I always make sure I stress that. So like if I lose one indoor unit, let's say this is like a 9K, let's say this is a 4-ton unit, and this is a 2-ton air handler, you got a 9K and a 7K, I could actually lose both of these because this 2-ton is still going to be 50% of the outdoor unit, the system will still run. But if I've got a 9K and a 7K here, and I lose the 2-ton, then the system can't run because now I'm below 50% connected capacity. Okay, so that's good information to have as well. So it will continue to heat and cool. Your H1 and H2 connections are for your wired controller. The wired controllers come factory set up for a 1-to-1 connection. So in other words, one controller per indoor unit. Make sure you leave it that way if you have one indoor unit, because if you change that in the project settings, it's going to give you an error code. So if you're going to, and you can control up to 16 indoor units with one wired controller, it's done in a daisy chain fashion across H1 and H2, just like you would D1 and D2, only you're using H1 and H2 because that's your controller connections. But you have to go into this controller and say, hey, it'll ask you for number of IDUs. A lot of guys get that confused. They think that's the number of IDUs on the system. The controller is not asking you how many indoor units are on the system. It is asking you how many indoor units is it controlling. The new XC7C controller, we actually had them change that, and it will say number of indoor units controlled by controller. So again, if I'm controlling 3 indoor units, I need to go into the project settings, set that to 3 because I'm controlling 3 indoor units. If I was controlling 4, I would set number of indoor units in the project settings to 4. That'll keep you from getting an error code. And it will keep you from completing debug.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that first part of that video that we got. Coming up after that is going to be piping links, dual zone layout, condensate float, condenser installation, sorry, nitrogen evacuation, and then the pre-startup, and then along with James's little quick video about doing the debug or startup. I hate the fact that it's called debug, but all the manuals say it's debug. So, but basically it's just a commissioning process, a startup process of the unit. That'll be talked about. And then also setting the static pressure for ducted units. Not a lot of questions came in, but we will talk about, we will answer your questions. There's a couple of the things I want to bring up. Is, again, last week we met with our TSAs down in Florida, and it was expressed that we don't do enough as far as troubleshooting with MultiPRO. So the next broadcast, which is going to be, let me get my dates correct here. The next broadcast is going to be on January 8th and January 9th out of Atlanta. Those are going to be live broadcasts. January 8th or 9th, I'm not sure, we haven't set the dates yet, but one of them is going to be nothing but troubleshooting. We're going to take all the time with functional equipment about troubleshooting mini splits. And then the second day is going to be all focused on troubleshooting MultiPRO with live functional equipment down there. We're going to bug them, make them not work, show you what to do to identify the problem as best we can with lab units. We can't duplicate everything that you would see out in the field, but we can certainly talk about it and talk about what would happen in those scenarios. So we are going to try to focus and give you guys some really good training information with functional equipment that's going to be nothing but troubleshooting the units. The intention there would be also be using the MultiPRO service tool, and then also the mini split service tool, so you guys get a better understanding of how those tools can be utilized as well. So that's the plan. Then also in this broadcast, the one thing I did not show the video of because of the time restraints we didn't show the video about selection software. So we have the web-based software selection, which is the, James, help me out. I'm got a lost
The system
words.
builder.
System builder, thank you. So we have system builder, which is web-based, and then we have selection software, which you actually download, and you can lay out any multi-pro system on the selection software. So that video we didn't share today. So when we post this video, we're also going to post a tech tip video showing how to do selection software. So you'll have both of them once this one's broadcast or posted on our library. So with that, did anybody else have anything else to add before we answer questions? Well, you guys are full of life today. Smile or something. Jesus, I'm the only one that's got a little pizzazz today.
That's what you call it, pizzazz.
Pizzazz. Yeah, that's it. So Daniel, you want to get us going on the questions?
Yeah, we've got a few questions here, and I think you'll love to talk about this one, Greg. Sean says the communications on multi-pro is much easier. The one thing the contractor will need to do is braze on the Y connections or headers. Really advanced variable speed technology along with the indoor air handler variable speed ? Yes, the indoors variable speed as well. Would be awesome if we have flare Y connections, as I see some guys don't want to braze or press, just saying. So great opportunity to really kind of talk about flares and the experience that you had with a job just recently.
Yes. So multiple different takes out of that whole statement or question that Sean put out there. And Sean, thank you for sharing that, because you're triggering my mind to have things to talk about, which is important stuff to talk about. So let me talk about the communication first. It does use CAN bus technology. It's very robust. We don't have a lot of issues with communication problems with these units. Also, keep in mind that all of the indoor units are 230 volt units. If you apply 120 volts to them, they will still communicate. Doesn't mean the system's going to work properly, but they will still communicate. So it's very, very important that we make sure we're checking the voltages on those units when we're having issues with the equipment. That line voltage input is extremely important to make sure we got the right voltage applied to it. You could have a broken leg coming from your breaker. You can have a bad connection, especially if you're powering more than one indoor unit off of one power source. It can happen. So a voltmeter at your L1 and L2 connections on that unit is extremely important just to verify the voltage. And then it doesn't matter if you're talking multi-pro or you're talking commercial VRF. I've had those phone calls with mode boxes and they're buzzing and all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, did you check the voltage? Yeah, it's 240. It's exactly 240. Come on. And then they actually go measure it. It's 120 volts. So I can't stress it enough. You know, when we ask the question, when somebody calls in tech support, did you check the voltage? We mean, did you put a meter on it? Don't tell us just what we want to hear. Actually get your meter on there and measure it, because it's so easily to do. Another TSA just shared with us that they had a system that was running fine all summer long on 120 volts, but then when it come to heating, it wouldn't work because the solenoid for the four-way valve is 230 volts and it wouldn't switch into heating mode. So measuring that voltage is huge. James, you want to add anything about the CAN bus communication on multi-pro?
I mean, yeah, it's easy to connect and it's robust. I mean, what I like to say is, unfortunately, you know, people's introduction to communicating systems were, well, typically communicating systems that people came up with like a year ago or something, you know, not a long-term development or anything like that. I mean, GREE's been using CAN bus technology for the past couple decades. I mean, one of the benefits to it is that you can lose an indoor unit or something like that, and everything continues to work just fine. I mean, it can be wired wrong. I mean, you know, you've seen the creativity out there in the field. There's all kinds of different things that you could do, but I mean, to be honest, I mean, we've absolutely had people go out of their way to not follow the instructions, and the unit works okay. It works just fine. And they're like, well, I ran 18.8, and just used 2 wires, and it's working fine. I'm not changing it. It's, well, okay. Well, if you end up with a communication problem, oh, excuse me.
Yes.
Bless
So
you.
now I got pizzazz.
There you go.
But no, I mean, if you end up with a communication error like years later or something like that, I mean, it's hard to predict. But I mean, if you follow the instructions like it's written out, like I can use an example. I know Greg's got this example as well. There's been communicating systems that we've both dealt with in the past that, people had a hard time, getting around the wiring of it, or you were, running regular thermostat wire, but plus you were running communication wires, and people would mix those up, and people would, or just use, 2 of the conductors from the 18.8 for the communication, and then, you end up with a short or something. Everybody knows that thermostat wire, typically the insulation's not like the most robust insulation. That's how you end up with a 24-volt short, which I know is every technician's favorite call. Everybody loves that. But you can end up with a 24-volt short. Well, unfortunately, some of these communicating systems didn't really have the protections built in to protect against like that 24 volts. So they just knock out their boards.
Well,
Ours
the same
isn't like
thing
that.
happens. The same thing happens with mini splits. When you're using the 14-4 wire, you can get an insulation problem where you're getting voltage bleed from the power supply into that communication number 2 wire, and causes all kind of problem, gives you an E6 error code. So having that separate power supply and your separate cable for communication is huge, because it just eliminates a lot of issues.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm not going to talk about any particular wire or anything like that, but I mean, the insulation that's on those red, yellow, blue, whatever, it's the minimum. It's the minimum amount of insulation. If you can save $2, you'll save $2 and get that minimum amount of insulation.
Well, and that's why we stress on the mini splits that you use a stranded cable, because the stranded cable is going to be more flexible to all the bends and stuff like that you have to go through. I mean, one of the examples I've given contractors before is how many extension cords that you have solid core wire on them. None of them, because they got to be flexible to be able to throw the extension cord around and run your saws and whatever else. The same reason why we're using stranded wire in communication for mini splits is so that you got that flexibility to it. Same thing is with MultiPRO. We're telling you to use an 18-2 stranded wire, because it's going to be more flexible to the bends and wherever you got to drag that wire through.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, I mean, I can tell you that I haven't had a communication fault at my house that didn't involve wild animals. That's the truth.
James likes to keep rodents.
What's that?
James likes to give rodents a place to live.
Oh, well, no, I mean,
But that's the exterminator's problem, right?
well, in that one case, it was my problem. Took care of that in the most humane way possible, of course. I released it back to its family in the woods. That's what I told my kid. Yeah, I haven't had any communication issues. I mean, I'm on year 8 now on that, and trust me when I say I've messed with my unit more so than what most homeowners would. And I know Greg has too. I mean, there's been prototype controllers and broken controllers and just all kinds of different things that Greg has hooked up to his own system, which he's absolutely rolling the dice, with his wife on that. He knocks that out. It doesn't have to say, it doesn't say GREE on that piece of equipment to her. It says Greg on that piece of equipment.
You aren't wrong there.
So if anything goes wrong with it, it says Greg. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how else to tell you. I mean, I just want to reiterate what you've dealt with in the past with communicating systems, what you've dealt with inverter-driven systems, all that kind of stuff. If you got it and it had a big name brand on it, they haven't been doing it as long as we have. Which actually puts us kind of in an odd position. They might have invented air conditioners, and you know who I'm talking about, right? They may have invented air conditioners, but the fact of the matter is, if it's an inverter driven system, they don't have that long in development and engineering, and the mistakes that were, that were made, or the feedback from the field. They don't have any of that stuff.
Right.
So it actually puts us, like I say, in an odd position where, if the industry is moving towards more inverter driven systems and all that, are you going to pick somebody who may have come up with it last year and you get to test it for them? Or are you going to pick a company that's been doing it for how many years now? 30 something years at this point?
Yep. 30 years.
Which one are you going to pick at that point?
So I want to move on. James, thanks for the input. I want to move on to the other part of what Sean was talking about, flared wires connections and branch header. There's no way we're going to please everybody. And, I understand what he's saying with flare wires and stuff. We just can't possibly have stock for every type of scenario, whether you want to do flare headers or flare Y branches and stuff like that. So we're going to continue stocking at this point for now, just the brazing headers and Y branches. So the other thing to what he was talking about was variable speed. That's something extremely important I want everybody to understand. This came up in the TSA conference last week as well. I want people to understand that they are variable speed, but they're not variable speed in that a lot of people believe variable speed to be, because that's what they know in unitary product and what they've dealt with in the past. And what I mean by that is, so when you have a true variable machine, variable speed, air handler, furnace, whatever, in unitary product, typically what you're doing is you're going into that system and you're setting it to a specific CFM. In other words, let's say you set it for 1200 CFM. It's going to try to achieve 1200 CFM regardless of the static, meaning the blower is going to keep ramping, trying to overcome that static and actually give you that 1200 CFM. Now, whether or not it can be capable of doing it, depending on the ductwork, is a different story. MultiPRO variable speed is not the same thing. It is variable speed in that it's looking at the inlet and outlet temperatures on that coil, and it's going to adjust the blower speed according to the load that's being put on the machine. So when you have that fan on auto, the blower will be variable speed based on load, not based on CFM requirement. So I just want everybody to understand it is variable speed. It's just not variable speed where a lot of people view it to be, put it that way. So it's very important that you understand that. You're not going in and setting a specified CFM. So with that, Daniel, let's move on with questions.
All right. Arif says, do you supply refrigerant charge with the MultiPRO units?
So the refrigerant charge for the alters, I can tell you, we've decided, and the best way for you to do that is use selection software or system builder to determine the additional charge, because I think that's what he's talking about. What is the additional charge for the unit? So as far as the alters go, you really need to use that. In the training that should be coming up, I talk about the additional charge for the standard units and the simple math calculation as far as doing it. I don't think that's actually been shown yet. Okay, what else?
Let's see. Michael says, I have a lot of distractions today. Can I get a recording of this? Yes, it'll be recorded and posted on our website and the YouTube channel there, Michael. Steven says, are they 3-phase only?
So MultiPRO is single phase. We have commercial 3-phase equipment starting at 6 ton.
Okay. And then Josh says, can you get a BACnet interface for any of the commercial systems?
James, I'm going to let you answer that one.
Can you get BACnet for the 3-phase systems? Is that what you said?
No, any of the commercial systems. So you may be referring to MultiPRO as well.
Yeah, no. So we can get BACnet for every product that we have. So we can integrate our mini splits. We can integrate our flex. We can integrate XPack, VRF, whatever. We can integrate every one of those things. So whether that's BACnet, MSTP, IP, LawnWorks, HomeWorks, basically when it comes to controls, we do have a control solution for anything that you can come up with. In fact, we have a robust enough control system available to us through Cool Automation that you can eliminate the need for BACnet, or building a management systems or building automation system integrators and all the costs that are associated with that. If the majority of the job or all of the job that you would be wanting to communicate with is going to be the air conditioning system on that building, which most of the time it is, we can eliminate all that altogether. If people just want to be able to operate their air conditioning system, we can absolutely do that. You don't have to bring in somebody from one of the big name companies and spend $50,000 to integrate it. You've got an integration system that's just about as plug and play as you can imagine. But we have that all the way down to, just some Wi-Fi stuff if you're wanting to do that with a house, for example. So we have as complex as you want and as simple as you want. So just reach out to us. Any questions on that or how to integrate it and all the rest of that, we can definitely support you on that.
Well, and I encourage anybody that's going to bring Cool Automation into it and have multiple condensers and stuff, before that equipment's installed, please have a conversation with us so that we can make sure it installs very similar to the central controller, but addressing it and everything and having it ready to go so that when you go to bring in Cool Automation, it's going to be rather simple for you. So not that if you install the equipment that we can't make it happen, it's just more time consuming to do it after it's installed. All the units have already been brought online and they've already been through the commission process. If we can do this up front and know exactly the steps to take to set up Cool Automation, so that when we bring Cool Automation into it after the systems all are up and running, it's going to be able to pull in those addresses really easy and make your life a lot easier. So if you're not familiar with that process, please reach out to us and we'll be happy to explain it to you and make sure you know what you're doing when you go to install all that equipment.
Okay, and I think that kind of answers Lance's question. Can you touch on Cool Automation devices with the MultiPRO? So next question is to Tariq. Hopefully I said your name correctly. Do you have the heat recovery in MultiPRO commercial? And if yes, are there any videos available?
I'm sorry, I missed the question.
That's okay.
Sidetracked for a second.
Do you have heat recovery in MultiPRO commercial? And if yes, are there any videos available? That's only on the 3-phase, correct?
Yeah,
Correct.
yeah. So yeah, MultiPRO commercial was I guess we'll call it a marketing strategy, like as far as a simplified version of the 3-phase equipment. Yeah, we absolutely do. In fact, the outdoor units 6-ton through 14-ton are available in heat pump and heat recovery in the same model. So you can set it up to either be heat pump or heat recovery, so that reduces SKUs and all that. So if you want to stock some, you can go ahead and do that. So yeah, we do. We've got heat recovery. So just about as robust as any other VRF system that you would be familiar with. We also have ultra heat versions of all of those as well. So if you live in an area where people still choose to live and they're freezing every single winter, we've got ultra heat systems for that. That offers some of the same capability as like our MultiPRO Ultra or Flex Ultra or any of the other ultra heat equipment that we have. So we got a selection software, that helps you to design those systems. We also have a quick reference guide that shows you some of the basic layouts that you can do. So, I mean, our focus where we think we bring the most value is just a lot of experience in laying out those jobs, is that we simplify those jobs. We make those a realistic system, an easy to install system, therefore easy to service and all the rest of that. We don't really, I jokingly say it with our sales guys is that we do a lot of work to make less money because we sell less equipment in that regard. But, people talk about VRF being complicated. That starts at the design phase. They make these systems as complicated as they possibly can because it's just going to somebody who does quote after quote after quote, like a bid desk or something. We don't do that, we're more of a hands-on approach, and we understand what that system is going to look like because of our experience.
Yep.
So if you have any more questions about that, please let us know.
All right. So I think we should move on, and we'll circle back around to the questions, Greg.
Yeah, sounds good to me. Let's do that. Let's go ahead and run the next video segment, and we'll come back to your questions once we're done with that.
Total liquid piping on a 2 and 2.5 ton is 820 feet. 3, 4, and 5 ton is 984 feet. 3, 4, and 5 ton ultra is 492 feet. Maximum outdoor unit to indoor unit, giving you all those dimensions as well. Maximum length from the first branch to the indoor unit, meaning from your Y branch or header, you can go up to 131 feet on all of them. Height difference between indoor units, that's from indoor unit to indoor unit, is 33 feet on 2 and 2.5 ton, 49 feet on the rest. Outdoor unit height, outdoor unit, indoor unit height difference, outdoor unit above or indoor unit above. These are your differences. You can go 98 feet on 2 and 2.5 ton standard, 164 feet with the outdoor unit above, 131 feet when the outdoor unit is below, and on the 3, 4, and 5 ton, it's the same as far as those requirements go. Oh, let me go back. Connectable indoor units. So 2 ton was 4, 2.5 was 4, and so on. This is also referenced in that quick reference guide. This is how many indoor units you're allowed to do on those systems. So how we calculate that connection ratio. So it's easy math. It's the same thing that selection software is doing. It's the same thing that the system builder app is doing. You have to have no more than 135% connected capacity. So it's got to be between 50 and 135%. So this is just kind of giving you an example. If you had a living room, if your load was 20,000, well, we don't have a 20,000 BTU indoor unit, so you go with a 24. Bedroom 1 is 10,000. Well, we don't have a 10,000 BTU unit, so we go with the 12 and so on. So our indoor unit capacity is 54,000 BTUs. We take your 54,000 BTUs divided by a 4-ton outdoor unit. We're at 112.5% connection ratio. We're perfectly fine. We're within the 50 to 135% ratio. So that's where we get them numbers from. All right, so basic layout and piping layout. So you're going out to give this customer a bid. You're going to go out there and kind of lay it out. You're just going to walk the site, say, okay, this is roughly where I can keep my header, estimate how long your pipe runs are going to be, and so on. Locate where you would put a Y branch. The Y branch is FQ01AA. Again, these are in the quick reference guide, so you don't have to memorize this. And then we also have a 4-port header and an 8-port header. So let's say you're going out to the job and you're doing a quick layout for a 4-zone system. Remember what I said, try to keep these pipe sizes under 50 feet so that you're staying to the same size as the indoor units, particularly on the smaller units, because that's the ones that are using the smaller line sets. Like if you're doing an air handler and you're at like 2 ton or above, it's all going to, unless you get to 5 ton, that's going to be a 3/8, 5/8 connection, regardless of your pipe length, as long as we're not exceeding our maximum pipe length, okay? So with that said, you can kind of get a little general layout. Then we follow the rules in place. Remember, this is always going to be 10 feet minimum, and that is sized by the outdoor unit. So that's easy to remember. Remember your maximum lengths, outdoor unit to indoor unit. Maximum height, outdoor unit above indoor unit, and maximum height, outdoor unit below indoor unit. Your pipe sizes, again, are, like I said, are sized by the outdoor unit. The only one that's going to be 3/8, 3/4 is the 5 ton. The rest of them are going to be 3/8, 5/8. So, GREE MultiPRO basic layout limitations in a dual zone. A little more complex, but still simple. Size of your outdoor unit, the Y branch is determined by the outdoor unit. So this dotted line right here is going to be sized by the outdoor unit, as we talked about a minute ago. So if I'm doing a 4 ton, it's going to be 3/8, 5/8. If I'm doing a 5 ton, it's going to be 3/8, 3/4. Size of the Y branch to the indoor unit is determined by the indoor unit. So let's say this was a 2 ton air handler. I'd go down here, 18 to 48 is 3/8, 5/8. Let's say this is a 9K indoor unit here. I'd come down here. As long as I'm less than 50 feet or 49 feet, then my size pipe for there would be 1/4, 3/8 from here all the way to that indoor unit. And that's where I encourage you to try to locate this Y branch so that you're keeping these pipe lengths so you don't have to increase in size. All right, and there is some systems where it may be better for you to use a multiple Y branch setup. Again, that's going to be done in selection software so that we get everything right. But this example, I have a layout, so you got 10 feet to your Y branch, you got 40 feet between there and that Y branch. That pushes this Y branch way to the other end so that I can only got 32 feet to this indoor unit. And then I've got my 20 inches to that Y branch, and I'm at 31 feet and 28 feet here. So all of my indoor piping keeps it below that 49-foot range, and you don't have to worry about upsizing pipe. Some more information about installation of these units, just kind of an FYI, if you do put a condensate pump on a wall mount, the wall mount does have a place to connect the float. If you look at this picture closely, it says pump down here. That doesn't work properly. So what I tell guys to do is take your pump power, go directly to L1 and L2 on your terminal block, and then take your float, take this jumper off, undo those 2 screws, take the jumper out, and hook your float on those 2. If the float opens on the condensate pump, you will get an L3 error code. To get to that little jumper on that wall mount, you do have to take the outer cover off, and you'll take the cover off the electric box assembly. But you don't have to pull that board all the way out. All you got to do, that board will slide towards you, and you only got to slide it a couple inches. That little jumper right there is right at the very end of the board. It's not that hard to get to, so just kind of an FYI. On the wall mounts as well, there is no H1, H2 if you want to use a wired controller. Your H1, H2 is going to be this yellow and white wire hanging down to this Molex. Just cut that Molex plug off and connect one of your wires to white and one of your wires to yellow, and then at the controller you'll hook one wire to H1, one wire to H2. It is not polarity sensitive, so you don't have to worry about that either. If you actually took this thing apart and really looked at it like I did, you follow the wires all the way up, they're soldered onto the board at H1 and H2. So obviously you mount your outdoor units, make sure it's secure, use a standard wall bracket in snow-prone locations. This is very much like we were talking about with the flex unit. You don't want this thing right on a concrete pad. Remember, both pipes have to be insulated, liquid and suction. We do give you a nitrogen pressure test recommendation. Start with 150 PSI for 3 minutes, increase it to 325 for 5 minutes, 500 pounds for 1 hour, just to ensure you don't have any leaks, because the last thing you want to do is let that charge out of that condenser and then find out you got a leak. And then we also give you, there's a lot of piping with MultiPRO, so we recommend that you do a triple evacuation. So we kind of give you a recommendation to pull it down to at least 4,000 microns, hold for 15 minutes, break it with 3 pounds of nitrogen, hold for 20 minutes, pull down to 1,500 microns, hold it for 2 minutes, break with nitrogen, hold for 20 minutes, pull down to 500 microns, hold for an hour. Does not rise above 1,000 microns. Now you've done 2 things to ensure you don't have any leaks. You have done a nitrogen pressure of 500 pounds for an hour to ensure you don't have any leaks, and you also did a triple evacuation, which means you got a good, clean, dry system, and you also made sure it held 500 microns for at least an hour. I love when guys do vacuums, like I let the vacuum pump run all night. There's no reason for you to have to run a vacuum pump all night. You should be able to use a micron gauge, and if you're not achieving if your microns don't keep dropping, then either you need to break with nitrogen so that you can get your vacuum to come down, or you may need to change the oil in your pump. Or, like we always talked about in many of our trainings, use core removal tools. Get that Schrader core in that service valve out of your way so that you get a better flow rate and you'll achieve these vacuums a whole lot faster. G1 and G2 are used for central control or automation, just kind of an FYI. So anytime you're going to have a job where you're going to have more than one outdoor unit and you're going to use central control or cool automation, pre-startup, power all the indoor units on, also display AO on the unit and or wired controller. Remember, some of these units, if you got a ducted unit, you don't have a display to look at. So you're dependent on looking at the wired controller for any error codes, whether it be an error code or it be an informational status code. AO is a status code. Any units displaying CO have a communication error. You need to figure out why you got a communication error. If all units display CO, check the outdoor unit at D1 and D2 to ensure it isn't connected to G1 and G2, because that could give you the error code. Also check that the first indoor unit, the D1 and D2, make sure we didn't get the wiring crossed up to H1 and H2. Some of you guys are probably thinking, why would you do that? And if you know, but trust me, I've had that phone call. So just double check your wiring. Once it's all corrected, the error code should clear automatically. You need to go through the indoor units, walk through, make sure all of them say AO before you start that unit up. Because if you start that unit up and you have one of the units that's in CO, it can't address properly. It's never even going to pick that unit up. So instead of you having 4 indoor units, you're only going to have 3. That's a problem. Okay, we are going to play that short video with James on the startup.
I'd like to walk you through the step-by-step process to ensure proper operation of the MultiPRO system. So why do we have debugging? Among other things, this process helps the system determine how much refrigerant piping has been installed and ensures proper operation. Before beginning, double check that a pressure test has been... Alright, now that your installation is complete, your MultiPRO system must go through a startup sequence also known as debugging. I'd like to walk you through the step-by-step process to ensure proper operation of the MultiPRO system. So why do we have debugging? Among other things, this process helps the system determine how much refrigerant piping has been installed and ensures proper operation. Before beginning, double check that a pressure test has been performed, the system has been evacuated to below 500 microns, and that the additional refrigerant charge was weighed in. Also ensure that the service valves are open on the outdoor unit and that the power has been applied to the outdoor unit for the recommended 8 hours. If you have a C model as indicated by the model number ending in WLCTU, you'll perform the following steps. Access the control board of the outdoor unit by removing the top cover. There you'll find a 2-digit display and 4 buttons labeled SW1 through SW4. This display should read AO, as should all indoor units and wired controllers. Press and hold SW3 for 5 seconds. Once you let go, the display will change. This display will show the step and the status of each step. Do nothing until 04 is displayed. 04 will display, and then the number of indoor units the outdoor unit sees will be displayed. If this number matches, press and release SW3. If the number doesn't match, check all the displays on the indoor units or wired controllers to find out which one is not communicating. The problem unit will display C0, meaning a communication error, or the unit may not have a display. On the unit without displays, check power. 05, 06, and 07 are internal communications checks. You'll do nothing. 08 indicates whether or not the crankcase heater has been on for 8 hours. If it hasn't, the unit will display 08 and then UO. You should wait until the minimum time has elapsed. If the power was on for 8 hours, the display will move on automatically. When 10 and on is displayed, the fan or fans and compressor will start. The system is checking that the service valves are open. When the display reads 12 and then AP and you needed to add remaining charge to the system, ready your scale, gauges, and refrigerant cylinder. If ready, or if no additional charge was needed, press and release SW3. The system will now display either 15 and then AC, meaning it will now run in cooling mode, or 16 and then AH, meaning that it will run in heating. The system chooses heating or cooling automatically based on ambient temperatures. If the system is starting in heating and you need to weigh in additional refrigerant, you'll wait until the debugging process is stopped, run the system in cooling, and then weigh in using the suction line. The system will run for 45 minutes to an hour. On your C model, you may notice that some indoor units start before others. This is normal. Once debugging is complete, the system will shut down. Simply turn the indoor units on in the desired mode. Thanks for watching. At GREE, we're by your side.
I hope you enjoyed James's presentation there on the system startup. That video has been out for quite a while, so there's been a few changes as far as what he said in that video. So what he said in that video was you take the top of the unit off to get to the 4 buttons, which is true, except for on the new Ultra. You would take the front right panel cover off, as I showed you on that machine in the front of the unit. You got one board in there, big vertical board. Those same 4 red buttons are on that board. So on the new Ultras, it's in a different location. The other thing is the 8-hour warm-up. So since that video was produced, we came up with some new rules. So if your debug stops at 08 UO that James talked about in that video, this means that the compressor has not had the 8-hour warm-up that's required. As you can see from my PowerPoint there, you can override it, but we want you to override it with rules, right? So that we don't end up with a damaged compressor. So, if power's connected to that unit and it's above 50 degrees, you want to make sure you had at least an hour of warm-up time to the crankcase heater. If it's between 32 and 50 degrees, you want at least a 2-hour warm-up. 14 to 32 degrees, it's going to be 4-hour warm-up. And below 14 degrees, then you need the full 8-hour warm-up. So once it gets to that 08 UO, and it's stuck there, but we've met our rules over there, and you need to override it, then you just press SW3 one time, and it'll move on in that debug process, just like James talked about. Take you to step number 9, and then 10, and so on. So another thing about ducted units. So whether it's an air handler, a ducted unit, airflow is a big deal, because now we're adding ductwork into it. All of the controllers come pre-wired and preset in the parameters. At a default of 5, you can set the static curve between 1 and 9. So the way you go about adjusting for the static pressure on the controller is you want to turn that fan on high speed, let the fan run, measure your total static pressure drop across the air handler. If your total static pressure is 0.4 to 0.5, then that factory setting to 5 is perfect. If the total static pressure is below 0.3 or 0.3 and below, you're probably going to need to lower that. So you might try it more like 3 or 4. And then if you, again, depending on how dramatic of a change you're going, if you're going from 5 all the way down to 1, you should see a pretty significant difference in your static pressure. If I go from 5 to 4, you're not going to see as much, right? But when you're lowering that curve, your static pressure should drop. Then let's say we get 0.6 or higher, remeasure the total static pressure, it should decrease. Because essentially what you're doing is you're setting the blower to a higher torque to overcome higher static. My caution to you that is if I'm measuring, let's say I measure on a unit and I get like a 0.8. So I take that from the default of 5 and I cram that thing all the way up to even, let's say 9. Then I remeasure my total static and it hasn't come down any. you've got ductwork issues. You've got to go figure out whether you got too restrictive of a return, too restrictive of a supply, because if you're cranking that controller all the way up to 9, you're giving that blower more thump. And with that more thump, static should come down. It's almost like if you went in there and put in a bigger blower. You didn't, you just turned up the torque on the blower. And the torque will overcome the static to a point. But if your ductwork is too restrictive, it won't. Or if you're doing it, and maybe you're doing it on a PM and you're checking the static. If the filter's clogged, it'll do the same thing, okay? So, but very important that we set that. You don't want to go in there and set, I've had some guys say, well, I just tell them to turn it up to 9. That's a bad idea, because what happens is now you just gave that blower the full torque setting, and now it's not going to modulate because you don't have ductwork. What I mean by that is if you set it to 9, but your total static was only at like 0.4 or 0.5, you've given that blower that full torque setting. So now the way the MultiPRO air handler works is it's looking at the inlet and outlet temperature sensors on that coil. So when the fan's on auto, it'll adjust the blower speed. But if you crank that thing all the way up to the highest torque setting and you don't have any kind of high static, it's never going to modulate down. So if the blower's not modulating at all, that's the complaint. They put it on auto and it always runs at the same fan speed. It's because your controller's not set up right, or you got too high static pressure drop across your air handler. Okay? All right, moving on. So after startup operation of the information, I always like to show this slide just because it kind of gives you these running parameters. UE is pressure equalization, UP is pump down, UC is cooling, unit heating, A4 is oil return, A3 is defrost. So make sure you explain to the customer which unit is the master, the main indoor unit. Remember, that's going to control your mode. Master unit determines mode of system. I just said that. All other indoor units will not be able to select the opposite mode. With wired controllers, this means that the opposite mode will not display. With handheld remotes, the opposite mode will cause the unit to sound a double beep indicating an invalid setting. I want you all to remember that one right there. If you're using a remote control and you're going to control that unit and you give it a signal and it goes beep, 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 it ain't accepting what you're telling it to do. If it goes beep, it just accepted what you told it to do. Okay? So that's a good one right there. That's a good one to remember. Indoor units already cooling or heating will switch modes based on the master setting. That goes back just to that loft unit I was telling you about. You've had it in heating season. You've got all of the downstairs units set at 74 degrees in heat. Everybody's happy. You got that loft unit that nobody's up there. You set it at 61 degrees. Then come spring, you got that warm day. You turn the master to cool, and then you go in the first floor and you reset all those to the temperature you want for cooling, and then you completely forget about that loft unit. Now that loft unit's sitting up there holding a 61 degree set point in cooling mode because nobody went up there and changed it. That's what we mean there. All right. Explain the light button feature of the remote. That's what turns the display on and off on a wall mount or a cassette. A lot of people are like, well, why would you do that? Well, what if that thing's in your bedroom? You may not like that thing glowing all night long. You may not like that night light. Let's quickly answer any more questions that might come in, and we'll call it a day.
Welcome back, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that segment and video on the design and installation of the MultiPRO system. So we're going to jump back into your questions in just a minute. I want to feed a little more information to you. First off, that I want to bring up is on the new GMV6 Ultras that we now have on our library. The dead giveaway, and I believe I talked about it in there, is the model number will have 2 V's in it, so you know you've got the GMV6 Ultra. The thing that we were lacking for the GMV6 Ultra was the service manual. Because it needed some help. So thanks to Jesus, he did a lot of work on it as well. We have that manual completed, and it's being in the process right now. I just looked; it's not loaded yet, but it's going to be loaded on the website. So I think you guys will really like that manual. We put a lot of effort into making it a little easier to navigate through. I also want to tell you that that new Ultra machine is a 4 red button push on the board when you do debug and all that. It's the same as the standard. So even but it's a much easier service manual to read. So if you're troubleshooting in a unit and you're working on a standard unit, the error codes pretty much don't, with MultiPRO, they stay the same. Okay. So what I'm saying is that you may be able to go to that service manual, even though you're working on a standard machine, and get your answers more quickly. Just remember the piping diagrams and stuff like that. There is some stuff in there that's only on Ultra, but I encourage you to look at both service manuals when needed. Okay. So that's going to be getting uploaded shortly. The other topic of discussion I wanted to talk about was we've had multiple different contractors, and I'm not trying to throw names out there. I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus, but it's come up in multiple times where, especially wall mounts, the contractor's cutting off the flares. I'm going to tell you right now that that's not a good idea. First off, after that flare on the unit side of it, that is metric piping. So your press fits are not going to work properly. Any other type of fitting you're trying to do is not going to work properly because it's not 3/8 standard or 1/4 inch standard like your line set would be. The other problem with that is if you decide to braze that head in, you also have strainers right there on that head, and it's very possible, depending on how much you heat that, you could actually damage the strainers. The manufacturer, GREE being the manufacturer, they build those with flares, and they expect you to hook them up with flares. So I don't, I've had many contractors basically asking for my blessing, saying, is it okay if I cut these flares off? And the answer is no. It's not okay to cut those off. You need to use the flare connections on the units. So get yourself a good flare gauge, get yourself a good flaring tool, torque them flares to specification. You shouldn't have problems with the flares. So with that, let's move on to questions.
All right, so we're just going to circle back to Lance Schoonmaker. He was asking about the system builder, and if his question was, system builder does not have does not save project information. It does save the job, but I have to put the equipment in if I go back to get the product info. I've been saving PDF in a separate file. So if we just want to get the answer, see what.
Yeah. So the first thing I'll say is be sure to scroll down when you do open up the project. Depending on the resolution, or if you're using it on your phone or something like that, there is some space where it still shows you open up the project. It still shows a green button at the bottom that says build a new system. I'm looking at one right now that was saved from March. It says build a new system at the bottom, but if you scroll just a little bit, then it's got all of the selections there. So like on the one I'm looking at right now, it's got a ceiling cassette, wall mount, another ceiling cassette or two, and then the outdoor unit. So it does save that information there for each one of those jobs. In addition to that, the project notes, customer information, that kind of thing are also saved there. And just to clarify, once you set up an account, it will save the jobs that you have and the equipment list. So if you didn't know that, if you're using the system builder, you set up an account with it. It's real simple. But yeah, it absolutely just looks like the build a new system screen. But like I say, if you scroll down, once, twice, or whatever, it'll show you that what was on that one.
Yeah, because I went back and checked some jobs for like fall and stuff while you guys were watching the video, and I had several of them that I went back and looked, and they're still there. So, but again, if you're having troubles with it, maybe the site's not working for you.
Yeah.
By all means, reach out to us. We'll take a look at it with you. Okay. So,
Right.
All right. Well, next question comes from Steven, and he was asking, what if someone needs heat in one room and everyone else needs air? I guess I could start off answering that question. I mean, I guess it just depends, what we're talking about here. We're talking about a commercial building, we're talking about a home. Um, I mean, as far as being able to simultaneously heat and cool rooms like that, I mean, we don't have products available, right, on the residential side of
not on the residential
yeah.
side. You're correct.
Yeah.
We don't have a single phase heat recovery
Right.
unit. So, James, I'm sure you got more to add to that, I'm sure.
Yeah, I do. Now, I can't speak for all homes. I mean, not a home that I would have, but there are some homes out there large enough to have three-phase. So, if it did require like a 6-ton or 8-ton or something, you can do heat recovery. Typically, most single-family homes are not going to require both cooling and heating. If your mother-in-law is always wanting air, she can have her own mini split or move. That's a little joke there. So, but anyway, no, if you do have a space that's going to regularly require, like if it's a gym or something like that, it's going to regularly require like an opposite mode of the rest of the place, a single zone mini split would be a good option for that. We've discussed single phase heat recovery quite a bit with the factory. I know of one manufacturer that has a single phase heat recovery unit. I mean, it's an enormous outdoor unit, but it is a single phase and it's heat recovery. But the applications are just very limited, typically, and the expense of a system like that ends up being more expensive than just doing like 2 systems for a place like that. But this also applies to commercial. If you're going to have a server room that's going to need cooling year round, it's always best to have a dedicated piece of equipment for that. Even on a heat recovery system, you still got defrost cycles and all kinds of other things that are going to occur. It's best to use, let's say, a Vario, to cover that small server room. You can do something like that. But like I say, not many applications, especially in single family homes, where you're going to need opposite modes.
All right. Jesus, next question.
All right. So the next question we have here is it's kind of what we were already talking about. Carlos was asking about on the commercial line, 6-ton and up, is the equipment available on single phase to A230 or is it only 3-phase?
Oh yeah, so 6-ton and up. It's only 3-phase. It's offered in 230 3-phase as well as 460-volt 3-phase with different models, or different lines. But it's offered in both. But we don't have a single phase 6-ton and up, and we don't have a 3-phase 5-ton and down. If you're doing 5-ton and down, and somebody's saying, "Hey, can we have a 3-phase, 3-ton unit?" There's not much in the way of a benefit of hooking that up to 3-phase. You would just be pulling 2 legs of that 208 230 power to give yourself 208. It's not a bang on, bang off compressor, so there's not much in the way of like an amp draw or current savings there, typically. I know that there's some systems out there that do have like a 3-ton that's 3-phase. Like I say, unless you've got a rooftop full of those and they're all standard compressor driven units, you're not going to be saving anything.
Yeah.
Well, because inverter technology, it is actually taking the AC power supply and converting it to a DC voltage and then creating its own cleaned up 3-phase sine wave. So that's why James is saying there's no real benefit there, because whether you're taking 3-phase power and cleaning it up into DC and creating a 3-phase, a sine wave to run a 3-phase motor, or if you're taking single phase and creating a DC bus and creating your own sine wave and running a 3-phase compressor, there's really no savings or difference there, right? So
yeah, I'm not drawing 90 amps every time I start.
Right.
You know,
Exactly.
our systems aren't dimming the lights, you know, that kind of thing.
And the other question that comes up a lot about MultiPro is people wanting to know what they need for low ambient controls. Well, I want to make sure everybody understands it's built into the machine. You don't need additional accessories for low ambient cooling. So just
Right.
keep that
Well,
in mind
you know,
as
to
well.
your point, Greg, that actually applies to every piece of equipment we got. The low ambient cooling rating that we have is the low ambient cooling rating. So we're not adding, you know, we're not having to add wind baffles. We're not having to add crankcase heaters or pan heaters or any of those things. That is, you've got that built in. It's ready to go.
All right.
Um,
All right, let's keep the questions rolling because
All right.
we're hitting a lot of time here. So
Yeah, so we'll keep on moving along. So we got Nancy was asking about if in defrost an indoor unit is displaying an A3, will shutting the indoor unit off and back on reset defrost?
yeah, if you were to, well, I mean, if you shut it off via power, right? If you pull the disconnect on it, it will reset the defrost timer. So, you know, you do have a minimum runtime before it checks to whether or not it's going to run in defrost at all, before it checks whether or not it should run into defrost, you know. So it's an on-demand defrost type thing. It's not just it runs for 60 minutes, runs defrost, runs for 60 minutes, runs defrost. It will run for 60 minutes, depending on there's settings that where you can make an adjustment to that, but it'll run for run in defrost, right? Turning off the unit, when it's in defrost, it's not really doing anything by turning off the unit. It's still going to be running its defrost operation, and the indoor units will display A3 during defrost operation. If you have a unit that has a display that has a way to show you A3, if you've got a duct
display or on the wired controller
on the display or on the wire controller, yeah.
Yes.
I think it's good to mention as far as the A3 status code that we're talking about it. You know, there are status codes that will be illuminated at different, you know, points of the system while it's running.
Mhm.
So not everything that you see as far as a wire controller, or I mean, if you have a technician at your house, you know, on the control board on the outdoor unit, necessarily a fault code. We do have status codes where it will illuminate on the control board or on the wired thermostat.
Right.
Jesus, I'm glad you brought that up because when a contractor installs one of these systems for a homeowner's never had a MultiPro system, because most likely they've never had a MultiPro system, it's important that they understand that they will see those status codes and talk about those status codes and say, hey, when you see this, that doesn't mean anything's wrong with the unit. Let it go through its cycle and then it'll exit back out of it. So
as a matter of fact, I came upon a situation, and it may be just based on combinations, but you can get an A3 if everything was off, right? It's in heating mode, but everything was off. Not satisfied, but off, right? And you turn on the system, you know, you go around, turn on the indoor units, that kind of thing. It can display A3 right out of the gate. It will run a short defrost cycle right out of the gate, and then go back to normal startup. So, you know, like if it had been off or whatever, and you still, like, the system doesn't necessarily know you've got frost on the outdoor coil, right? Because it's not running. It can't determine whether or not you have it. So it'll run A3 if everything had been off. I mean, it's not common that everything's been off. If you are absolutely using your heat pump system in a way that, like, I'm just going to leave it off during the day, and I'm going to come in from work or whatever, turn it back on, not really the way you ought to be using it. It doesn't save money.
So now,
but anyway,
there's other systems that do that, the same thing. It's called sacrificial defrost.
right.
So that the machine knows where it stands as far as defrost goes.
Right.
So yeah, I could totally see that. James, I'm glad you brought that up because I had never thought about that. So,
yeah, no, actually, I just remember. Yeah, I actually saw that the other day, and it reminded me because I've seen it multiple times in the past. It's also a good one of the good things about having one on your own home is you know, you get to see
or you
stuff
can do
like
like, or you can do like I did the first time I seen A3 was when I rolled out of bed and I looked at it, I'm like, oh man, what's wrong with ladies?
Yeah.
And then my own self, I didn't, you know, even at that time didn't realize that that's what the code meant. It was in defrost. I'm like an idiot when I went and looked it up on the computer. I'm like, really?
Yeah. Well, by the time you looked it up on the computer, it no longer displayed A3 and everything was running.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was already doing that by that time. So
Right.
anyway. All right, let's move on with questions. Hey,
All right, moving along, we got Michael. He had a comment. He's asking, he said, with spray foam houses, I have had several houses needing to heat in one room and cool in another, especially upstairs and downstairs.
Well, I mean, again, we don't have a single phase heat recovery unit, but that would be an ideal situation to have separate systems, especially when you're talking upstairs and downstairs. You know, in a spray foam house like that, you may be better off with separate systems. So you could actually run cooling on one floor and heating on another floor if you're having problems with that. So
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, love to think more about that. I mean, granted that I'm going to have significantly more R value in the attic, typically closed cell foam, if I'm not mistaken. Or maybe that's open cell typically. But I mean, basically saying that, you know, I've spray foamed the whole house and then but I still I have enough heat load upstairs that I would need to cool, but not have enough heat load downstairs that I need to heat. So I've got enough heat loss downstairs to want to heat, but enough heat gain upstairs to need to cool. Yeah, that would definitely need to be two systems.
I can see that. Yep.
My house is spray foam now. I mean, I don't have the exterior wall spray foam because, you know, we remodeled the house and then decided to do spray foam, and I wasn't about to, you know, drill holes in the wall and stuff. But you know, I'm spray foamed up, I'm spray foamed down. But I also don't have a large enough house to, you know, worry about that, you know. Not in the field anymore, so I'm not making, you know, $1 million a year or whatever. So, you know, but yeah,
Well, I think we've pretty much wrapped up the questions. Anybody else have any last thoughts that they wanted to bring up or anything like that?
No. Well, this is the last show of the year.
True.
So,
Yeah.
you know, want to thank everybody who has attended, especially the ones who attended all year. Appreciate that. I hope that you guys learned everything that you need to know. And,
All right. So,
yeah, go ahead.
So there's a couple of things I want to make sure I point out to everybody. So the next training will be on the 8th and 9th of January. We'll be live broadcasting out of Atlanta. And the next Talking Comfort Live will air on the 15th of January. It's going to be a preview of the AHR show. So, and in February, we'll do Talking Comfort live from the AHR show. So I think that's going to be fun. Do that from the actual show. I think it'll be neat. I think everybody, if you're not there, please join us on that AHR show. I think you'll like that. So, any but last minute things, guys.
No, thank you everyone for a great year, and Merry Christmas.
Yeah.
Merry Christmas to everybody, and remember, agree. We're by your side.
Your side.